Cord Meyer. He was 24 years old on Guam in 1944 when shrapnel from a Japanese grenade destroyed his left eye during combat. A Marine, first lieutenant, leading a machine gun platoon, he was badly wounded and initially feared dead. He survived, though the injury stayed with him for the rest of his life. His twin brother, Quentin, would die later at Okinawa. The Pacific War left its mark, but it also sharpened a conviction. Another global conflict, especially in the nuclear age, could end civilization. Back home, Meyer channeled that into public advocacy. In his 1947 book, Peace or Anarchy, he argued that preventing a catastrophe required more than alliances or the fledgling United Nations. It demanded real authority above nations. A supranational federal system to control weapons and enforce peace. He became president of the United World Federalists, growing the organization and attracting support from figures like Albert Einstein. For a moment after the war, the idea of moving beyond pure national sovereignty, it was debated openly in American intellectual life. The Cold War changed that equation. Soviet expansion, proxy conflicts, and aggressive front organizations made pure idealism quite vulnerable. The battlefield of ideas, universities, unions, magazines, student groups, it mattered as much as any military front. The Soviets invested heavily in shaping that space. The United States responded in kind, but often out of sight. In 1951, Meyer joined the Central Intelligence Agency at the invitation of Allen Dulles. By 1954, he headed the International Organizations Division. His role involved routing funds, frequently through private foundations and cutouts, into non-communist networks abroad. Student associations, labor groups, cultural congresses, and intellectual journals. The mechanism was designed for deniability. Support flowed quietly so the recipients could maintain credibility as independent voices, promoting democratic values and countering Soviet influence. However, many participants never knew the ultimate source. They believed their work stood on its own merit. A centerpiece was the Congress for Cultural Freedom. It sponsored high-profile conferences, backed journals like Encounter, and wove together writers, artists, and thinkers across Europe and beyond. The operation helped nurture the non-communist left and push back against Marxist appeal among intellectuals. Similar relationships extended to groups like the National Student Association. These were sophisticated systems of influence, not crude propaganda, but positioned ideas amplified through access, repetition, and the aura of autonomy. Meyer rose through the ranks, later heading the Covert Action Staff and serving as Assistant Deputy Director of Plans. Critics would later associate him with broader efforts, sometimes labeled Operation Mockingbird. It was a term for an alleged CIA cultivation of journalistic and media channels to shape narratives. Sounds very similar to what we just talked about. While the precise scope remains debated and no single program bore that name, the underlying architecture of hidden subsidies and relationships, it was extremely real. It extended the logic of the International Organizations Division. Build, reach, and legitimacy without fingerprints. His personal stories intersected with Washington power in ways that still raise questions. He and his wife, artist Mary Pinchot Meyer, they divorced around 1958 to 59 after being married since 1945. In 1958, their son Michael was killed by a car in Washington, D.C. Mary moved in high circles, including connections to President John F. Kennedy. In 1964, she was murdered while walking along the C&O Canal toll path in Washington, D.C. A suspect was acquitted, and lingering uncertainties and theories, they persist till today. By the mid-1960s, the machinery that Meyer helped operate began to surface. In 1967, Ramparts magazine and subsequent reporting exposed CIA funding of supposedly independent organizations, from student groups to cultural outlets. The reaction was swift and damaging. outlets and institutions built on claims of intellectual freedom, they suddenly appeared compromised. Every single one of them. Participants who acted in good faith, they were used, or at least they felt that way. Public trust in media, academia, and civic groups, it all shifted, and what had been framed as necessary defense in a total ideological contest now looked like, to many, manipulation from within. Cord Meyer, he defended the approach. In his 1980 memoir, Facing Reality from World Federalism to the CIA, he described the evolution as a clear-eyed response to Soviet tactics. The Cold War demanded contesting the war of ideas, not ceding ground. Leaving cultural and intellectual terrain uncontested would have been as costly as any battlefield defeat. He saw the systems as extensions of the conflict, pragmatic tools in a dangerous world. Yet the exposure revealed a deeper tension in the design itself. Covert funding created dependencies that, once revealed, tainted the very independence that gave the efforts credibility. Networks meant to strengthen Western voices instead fed a narrative of hidden control, and institutions that once seemed organic now carried the shadow of external direction. The short-term gains encountering Soviet fronts came with the long-term erosion. A harder skepticism towards information sources, a reflex to questions, motives in journalism and public discourse, and a fraying of the boundary between genuine civil society and state power. Meyer didn't set out to undermine trust. He began as a wounded idealist seeking structures to secure peace, and then adapted to build covert ones to defend freedom against a determined adversary. But the systems he helped construct, pipelines of money and influence threaded through foundations, magazines, and organizations, it carried consequences that outlasted the immediate battle. And once the veil lifted, the machinery that positioned ideas so effectively also made it easier for suspicion to continue to take root. Cord Meyer. He died of lymphoma and other ailments March 13, 2001 at the age of 80. He lived long enough to see the Cold War end in the West's favor, and to watch the deeper skepticism he helped make possible settle into the foundations of public life. There's no sharp break in this story. Just one through line. A man shaped by war, trying to answer how to preserve a free world in an age of total contest. From a grenade-scarred foxhole in the Pacific to the subtle architectures of the cultural Cold War. These are Interesting Things with JC.